to KYRS Medical Lake Spokane. I'm Erin. I'm here with Aaron, Val, Luke, and Pascal, and this is a co-production of KYRS and Range Media. Today, we are going to do a little bit of a retrospective, a holiday retrospective, looking back on some of our favorite stories that we published this year. Everybody's brought one or two things to the table. Pascal's a little bit of a rule breaker.
Much like a holiday potluck.
Yeah.
So they brought projects.
Yeah.
It's like the person that brings the gluten-free food.
Yeah, and nobody else is going to eat, but it's fine because
Projects were also one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Jeez. I support you, Pascal.
Thank you.
I support you too. Sometimes gluten-free is good.
Certain things can be, depends.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, who
Okay,
wants to
cool.
go first? Who wants to share
Oh.
their favorite stories?
Well, Val, why don't we? This was your brainchild. This
Yes, tell us about your
structure.
baby.
Oh, okay. So I
This is
have
part 1 of 2.
This is part 1 of 2. The first episode, we're going to talk about our favorite stories, and the second episode, we're going to talk about, or next week, if you're listening to this on the radio, we're going to talk about our New Year resolutions. But today, for this one, I am said because we are all blabbermouths and like to chit chat forever.
Shocker.
I divided this up. We have 50 minutes and 5 people, so each person gets 10 minutes each to talk about their favorite stories or projects. I'm setting a timer for 9 minutes, and I'll do a little wrap it up motion when it hits that, and then I'm gonna push a button if they go over 10 minutes, and I have 2 buttons. One is a Donald Trump fake news one, and one is a Staples Easy button, neither of which are sponsors of this podcast/radio show.
Which I think we're legally required to say because this is community radio.
Yeah.
These are just
We purchased
2
these.
buttons.
Well, we did not spend money on the Donald Trump button, I would like to clarify.
We
It
also-
was a white elephant gift that I received from a Idaho white elephant swap. It was purchased at like a gas station, I
Well,
think.
And
Oh my
the,
God.
the
Easy button just showed up as well, I think.
It just like appeared in the office one day,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
they usually do. I think they spawn. Anyways,
Probably.
so who's going first?
I got January 31st.
Cool.
Okay, I'm starting the timer. Hedge, go.
All right. So on January 31st, we had a pretty big scoop. I believe, we broke this story, right?
Yeah.
But it stemmed from Luke had been combing through, and Luke and I are co-bylines on this story. Luke was looking at Kootenai County jail records and realized that somebody who'd been arrested in Spokane was being housed in the Kootenai County jail, and he was arrested on charges of crossing the border illegally.
Who was he arrested by?
We were never able to figure that out, but we're pretty sure it was the feds.
We think it was Border Patrol.
Yeah.
But it wasn't totally clear in the records. But the reason this story was important, and it's titled "Immigration Officials Are Arresting People in Washington and Warehousing Them in Idaho." And the chatter says at least 4 people arrested in Spokane County, 1 for unlawful border crossing, were transported and held for several days at the Kootenai County Jail. The reason this is important is because Washington has a sanctuary law, the Keep Washington Working Act, which makes it illegal for local law enforcement agencies that are part of Washington state to cooperate with federal immigration enforcement.
Including warehousing people in our local jails,
Yes.
county jails and stuff like that.
So it is illegal for ICE and Border Patrol to arrest people for crossing the border illegally and cooperate or like working with. I guess it's illegal for this Spokane County Sheriff's Office to.
So ICE can do whatever they
Yeah.
want and Border Patrol can act within 100 miles of the border, which we, as a crow flies, are in the 100-mile radius, which is why we've always had a lot of, even before now, have had a lot of Border Patrol activity in Spokane. ICE can kind of do whatever they want, wherever they want, but the whole point of Washington sanctuary law is like they can operate with impunity, but local law enforcement can't support them. So it kind of seemed like if there was going to be warehousing happening, it shouldn't be happening at our county jail. So that's what I was looking for, was like, are there names of people who have been arrested? And then we started looking at Coote County to see if that's maybe where they were being, detained or whatever.
And so you found this guy, and we didn't name him in the story. We wanted to try to protect him from reprisals. He had worked for several years in Spokane in the service industry. A local immigration activist, Jennifer Mesa, told us he's somebody who probably got us through the pandemic. So he was working in frontline positions during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And he hadn't committed any crime except for crossing the border illegally, which is what the Trump administration said they were trying to track down, as people who were responsible for violent crimes, and this
Right.
made it readily apparent that was not true, and it kind of kicked off kind of a whirlwind of reporting. Like we did a lot of stories about folks being detained in Spokane County by ICE. And the Border Patrol, and we tracked them down through like Facebook posts, and a lot of folks were being arrested here and either shipped to Tacoma, where ICE has a detention facility, or to the Coote County Jail. But yeah, we put this piece together in like 4 days. It was I felt really good about this piece. I was proud of it. I'm glad you tracked it down.
Well, we should say this. So, Trump's the inauguration's on like January 20th, I think. This guy was arrested on January 23rd. So, ICE got to work immediately upon. There was basically zero lag at all before they took what was Trump's campaign promises and started doing them in our area like immediately. So. We published 11 days after the inauguration, but this stuff basically started happening the day of. So,
on an important note, we had some really good help on this story from our. I don't think she was interning for us at that point, but Sandra Rivera, who's a Gonzaga University student, she helped us pour through documents, and then we also had an unnamed person who built us a scraper and said the only thing that can stop a bad guy with a tech bro is a good guy with a tech bro.
And this person was our tech bro for this story.
Thank you, tech bro.
Very helpful, little bit of tech. Yeah.
The other stories start really early, and I want to talk about just kind of like the project that we kind of embarked on with Look to Justice.
Oh yeah.
And it was initially kind of just like a reporting partnership, but Look to Justice is run by incarcerated journalists.
But what time did that start?
We started working with them in February, just like a couple weeks after we published that first story. So the timeline stacks up pretty nice. And so we kind of like forged this relationship with Christopher Blackwell, he's the founder of Look to Justice. They do all kinds of like activist work. They write legislation, but they also like they don't employ journalists, but they work with incarcerated journalists to publish stories. And they do work all across like they've been published in Jewish Currents and the New York Times and the Washington Post, and these folks are like pretty heavy hitters. And we wrote stories with them about.
We should probably say that Christopher Blackwell is incarcerated in Washington, and he's sort of the person who created this organization and has been kind of at the forefront of like creating journalists who are incarcerated.
Yeah, he's one of the most prominent incarcerated journalists in the United States.
Yeah.
We did stories on how prison reform is extremely difficult in Washington because agencies ask for a lot of money up front, and lawmakers don't like that. We're in a budget crunch. I did a story with another journalist, Kevin Light Roth, who's also incarcerated, talking about how you have to go through drug treatment to get early release, and that's whether or not you are apparently addicted to any substance.
So people basically have to pretend. In some cases, have to pretend they're addicted, then pretend to get clean so they can get early release.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then Kevin wrote a story for us about how folks are eligible for early release if they committed murder as a teenager, but they're not eligible if the crime was lesser. And that's like, and there was systemic changes in the works for that, and then we publish a large number of stories in partnership with those folks. They're really good journalists. It was a really fruitful partnership. I haven't been in touch with Chris for a while, but I'd like to keep that going if I can.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's.
Wow. You're under time.
I'm really good. I'm really good at this.
One thing I was kind of struck by that I want to make sure we touch on, your reporting for that, like, was made difficult by the fact that they were incarcerated. Like, the jail puts limitations on how these journalists can communicate. Like, I remember we were getting ready for a radio show one time, and you were getting all of these like numbered texts coming in because they can't just send you their draft of a story to look at. It has to be like through these texts with like really narrow character limits. And so to get a story from one of these people who is incarcerated, you're like getting 15 numbered emails that you then have to put together into a document.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about that kind of working with incarcerated journalists that you look back on and were like, anything you want to say about the process, I guess?
Yeah, just the logistics are really cumbersome, and it's that way by design. Like Securus is a company that runs the communications tech for prisons in Washington, and that's another story that we've been looking at for a while that we'd like to write. But it's a really heavy onus to like try to work with incarcerated journalists, and they have access that I don't have, but they also like just there's a lot of like it's a very encumbered.
The system tries to limit them from telling their own stories.
Yeah. This is from a really long time ago, but HIV was incarcerated, or was HIV was criminalized in Washington State in like the early 90s, and one of the stories I wrote for the Inlander over a decade ago was about how this kid who'd like made a bad decision as a teenager was basically going to be a sex offender for the rest of his life, purely because there was this law on the books that both Republicans and Democrats unanimously passed because there was the fear and panic over the AIDS epidemic. And then when all the medicine that made it possible for people to not just survive but live like total lives with AIDS or with HIV came on the market, the law didn't change because it's easier to pass tough on crime laws than to repeal or make things easier. And it took like 5 years after I wrote that story for that law to get changed, but it did get changed. I think it's really powerful as journalists. Like, there aren't a lot of places where you can see any change happen in government at all, but it really does seem like with carceral stuff, at least in Washington State, journalists like bring it to people's attention, and even if it takes a legislative session or two, like, laws can change. So I think it's really important for us to be doing this work.
I agree. A lot of inertia, but it does change things.
And also the communication stuff that's going on in prisons and jails, we really need to start writing about it. It's like Securus is ridiculous. Because not only does it sound terrible, or it's expensive for the incarcerated people, but I was listening to, or I sat in on one of the calls you had with Christopher, and the call quality was terrible.
Yeah. You can't even really record it.
Yeah. So you're paying for the privilege of like speaking into a tin can, basically.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Red.
So one of my favorites this year was my favorite because I really liked the editing process, and that's like really nerdy, but that's mostly what I do here at Range as the managing editor, is edit things. And it was titled "Deputies Killed Donald Hagel a Year Ago. His sister is still looking for answers." This is a Hedges story. And it's just a really important story about how the now former Spokane County prosecutor wasn't really engaging with families impacted by police violence, and how hard it is to get accountability and justice for families who are impacted by this, who like their family members are killed by police. And the part of the like editing that like me and Hedge like tussled over, not in a bad way, but like in a good way. Like where like he really wanted to start his story off with, you know, from the perspective of the sister, Dawn Hagel, and it like kind of wasn't working with the like how we were trying to structure the story, and we just like hammered it out though, like and worked it like together to make Hedge's vision happen and make it make sense. And I don't know, that's like one of the funnest parts of this job for me, is just work with the reporters who are really good reporters and make their stories shine. So that's like kind of like a nerdy behind the scenes one. My other
it's also like it's just like I don't think people can see this, like writing is not a solitary thing in a newsroom. Like there's always like collaboration that has to happen, otherwise the stories don't work. And so the editing process is really important. I really enjoyed that too.
And I also enjoyed like the nuance of this story, because you know, we even put like an editor's note in the middle of the story that says it's important to note that while Donald Hagel was facing an accusation of a violent crime, he had not yet been convicted of it. Under U.S. law, everyone has the right to due process and to face their charges in court. And that's one thing I love about Range, is that we can really inject that nuance. Not inject it, because inject makes it sound like it's not natural, but like the nuance is natural, and we can really bring out that nuance and kind of ponder it, and you know,
like this is a really complex thing. Like Don Hagel had been accused of a really heinous crime, and that's why he was in contact with the police. But there's a tendency for folks to say, oh, that person's the criminal, that means they deserve to die, but he'd not been convicted.
And I enjoy like being able to question like openly as a journalist, like, do police get to be judge, jury, and executioner? You know.
I also think it's there's not as much enterprise reporting at all in the world anymore, and less than I've ever experienced, I think, in my time at in just being a person reading the news in Spokane, whether I've been in the newsroom or not. And so like having us around to do enterprise level reporting is super important, because there just isn't as much of it. So it's a really awesome niche that we get to fill, I think.
My other favorite, this is also kind of a cheat, but and I'm gonna go next because they happened throughout the whole year, is Lauren, like anything written by Lauren Pangborn this year.
Our urbanism columnist.
Our urbanism columnist is amazing, and I really enjoy working with her and editing her work. And she started writing for us back September of 2024, and it's just been a really cool experience to get her perspective on like all of the nerdy urbanism stuff, and also like kind of get to bring this like a columnist voice to Range, even though many people would argue we're a very voicey news outlet. I just like, I like to see it's like the intersection of like stuff that the city is doing and like being involved in the process, because like Lauren is part of the bike advisory board, and bringing it to people like our readers and saying, hey, this is what you can do, this is how you can get involved. And so it's like all of those good things in one in Lauren. So I really like that. And she writes short.
Hey.
Not short, but she writes
she hits her workouts.
Concise. And I love it. And then also like we did a community bike ride with Lauren this year, and that's kind of like an offshoot project that I really loved.
We like really consciously don't want to do a lot of like opinion, because of the work we do. We don't want to get it confused. We don't want people to be confused about what's hard news and opinion, but I really love having a columnist, and maybe, I would want to make sure that any other columnist we brought on was as like dialed in and professional as Lauren is, but like somebody to really focus on something like bike ped issues or just urbanism in general, it like really, I don't think I would have expected how much it also sort of shapes the rest of the newsroom, and it just gets that stuff in our minds more. I think we're probably writing about more like STA stuff more because Lauren's in our ear. And it led to some pretty cool reporting that you two did. Like the Flock story was partially like from
The Flock story,
conversations.
It came from Lauren being interested in that from like a bike ped standpoint. I also think it's kind of funny. I look at how we label Lauren's stuff on like Instagram and the website, and it's like column, all caps. Here's the name of this piece to make that difference very clear. But I really love Lauren's work.
And then I still have a minute 55.
Sure, go for it.
I'm skipping ahead to July, and this is be quick. This was the day after, or the day of, maybe, when the Spokane 9 were arrested by the federal government. It was the same day. Aaron, you wrote a story of how to take action against injustice today, and what you can do to support local immigrants and activists targeted by the federal government this afternoon and beyond. And it gave, Aaron talked to different organizers and local organizers, the ones who weren't arrested, and people who have a lot of experience, and just trying to channel the public's anger and frustration and stuff, and wrote out a quick story of do what you can and can't, or what you should and should not do. So don't protest today. That's gonna. They were encouraging people to not protest that day because it was, they don't want to escalate the situation. And then how you can support immigrant communities and workshops you can go to and places you can donate to, and I really like that part of our job too, is that we can say this is wild that these people got arrested on federal charges, and it's totally valid that you feel this way, but here's some productive things we can do together. And that's another favorite thing of ours that we get to do.
I think I'll start with one from May. This is May 16th, 2025, when I laid myself off.
Damn.
And I think more than whatever was in the column, which was brilliant, but
it's a great column.
It was, I think what we were trying to do here was, Range has been a profitable, in quotes, a sustaining operation for its entire existence. And we talk all the time when we're doing fundraising and stuff about how we don't want to be the Guardian, or we don't want to be, Wikipedia, where we're we're always on the verge of dying, because that's not true, but we do really need
The Intercept.
The Intercept.
If you don't meet our fundraising goal in the next 5 minutes,
this puppy will die and Donald J. Trump will take over the world. Yeah, we don't ever want to do that, but also we were at a point where we really needed support, and it was bad enough that I had to lay myself off. Then Val actually a little bit later laid herself off, and we're in a really amazing place financially, but it was this moment here, and actually last August, in August 2024, when we had a similar situation, it really demonstrates how the folks who read us and care about the work we do really show up. It wasn't the outpouring of support that came in after this wasn't enough for us to immediately hire ourselves back or anything, but it was the beginning of something that that got us to probably where we're in we're going to talk about this more in part 2, but got us to a point where I think we're more financially solvent, and we've got a longer runway. We've got about a 2-year runway for the current operation we have. And that's a place we've never been in before. So that's a thank you to the readers and listeners and when we don't do this lightly. Like I said, we hate doing it, but when we fire up the emergency flares, it's a real blessing that people come to our aid, because not every newsroom has that. So I think it's a testament to the trust that everybody around this room has built with the folks who read us, and it's a testament to Spokane just being the place that shows up for the things it loves. That's awesome. So while I think we were both laid off, Val, you and I did a Q&A. This was about a month and a half after the June protests, the ICE protests that kind of subsumed a good chunk of our year. I would say the ICE stuff and the fallouts, the immigration stories in general, which we talked about starting in January.
Kind of shocking none of us picked to talk about the protest coverage.
Because I'm sure that is probably the top thing. So, but I also think it's a testament to be like, protest was like a really unexpected moment in the stream of what we were already doing, which was, I think, the most in-depth and important immigration reporting that happened in the area. And then when June 11th happened, everybody flocked to that because it was a spectacle. And I still think we covered it better than anybody, in my opinion. So, and this was part of that coverage. And the reason I specifically wanted to call out this Q&A that Val and I did in the chief's office, asking our relatively new SPD chief, Kevin Hall, about, okay, this is your first big protest, like, how are you keeping people safe? You said you didn't use tear gas, but it sure seemed like there was tear gas and pepper pellets and all these things. I think the questions we asked were amazing. You, Val, specifically asked a lot of questions about reporter safety. Like, when Sellers was in the scrum, they got pushed around a lot, and like, what is it, what steps is SPD taking to ensure that they're, not just obeying the laws and protocols, but making civil unrest a thing that's enshrined in the Constitution, as safe as possible for the people doing it. Just the fact, like, Chief Meidel would not have taken our call. And so I think both it's a new day at Spokane Police Department, and I do think it's fair to take note of that we're under a very, very different sort of law enforcement administration in the city. But also, I think it's a testament to the work we've been doing. Like, you can't ignore us anymore. It's been 2 years of Carl, our former colleague, getting kicked out of sheriff's press conferences, to getting, that was about a 2-hour sit down with the chief, where we had his undivided attention and we got to ask literally any question we wanted. So I think that's a testament. I kind of have editor-publisher hat on right now, where I'm just like giving us our flowers. But to me, this is like proof that I think our readers and our listeners believe Range is a super important newsroom for our area. I think 2025 might have been the year that everybody had to grudgingly accept that we're here to stay, and that we're kicking butt.
And we will rise from the dead, like we did.
And you can't, and you ignore us at your peril.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you hear that, people who are currently ignoring us?
That
You do so at your peril.
Do so at your peril.
I might write something mean about you.
So yeah, those were my two.
Nice. Oh wow.
Pascal, when were your projects?
Mine was the organizing summit in October, or the podcast episode came out in October, then the food resource map as a whole.
Why don't you go next?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm not usually on the radio or on podcast episodes other than recording intros, so this will be interesting.
Man, don't mess it up, brother.
Thank you. I won't.
That's so aggressive.
No, but yeah, so I actually chose 2 projects. The first one was in October. One of our podcast episodes was called Community Organizing in Spokane. In September, there was a Repower conference. There was a bunch of organizers who came together and went to this conference just about like organizing. But like the reason I chose this was because I kind of have a background, I guess, in advocacy. When I moved to Spokane, it was like I kind of hit the ground running, I guess. And a lot of my community is like in this kind of activist space, but I'm really proud of how that segment turned out. I interviewed a handful of people, and when I talked to them, it was mostly like people I knew, which made it a lot easier to talk to them and kind of yap with them in that way. It was something just I put a lot of work into, and it was also really nice because when I went to the actual conference parts of it, there was honestly a lot of people I didn't know either, which was really interesting to talk to people and get to know them a little bit.
What's your like biggest takeaway from the event? Like, what did you hope that people's biggest takeaway from your segment on the event was?
I think the biggest thing I was hoping people would take away, and I hope they did, was there is a sense of hope. Like, a lot of the people I talked to, both during interviews and like just like yapping with people, was they talked a lot about hope and taking action during this administration. And like it just was really like hope filled for me and for the people I feel like in that space. And it seemed like I think it was a 4-day summit, which in retrospect I am kind of glad I didn't do that as a participant, because I don't think I would have been able to sit through that because my ADHD. But yeah, I am like really proud of that segment, and I a lot of it was like brought me a lot of hope to talk with people about it. Yeah. And if you guys want to listen to that, I will link it in the episode. The second project I wanted to talk about was the food resource map we all kind of worked on.
That was a lot of, like, that was like you a lot. Like, you were, validating all the data, basically.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I guess.
You did so good at it.
Thank you.
So for our radio listeners who might not be on our website all the time, what was the food resource map, and why did we decide we needed to, it was a thing we wanted to do for people?
Yeah.
So during the shutdown, when SNAP funding had like stopped, and we were reporting on food banks, seeing COVID levels of traffic and need, and actually our colleague Carl, who is now at Watersmeet, approached us and asked us, like, is there a way to bring all of the, like, there's a bunch of lists of food resources around Spokane and Spokane County, and he was like, can we just put that all in one thing? And and then,
well, not only, so it's like there are a bunch of different resource lists. Some of those lists are like PDFs, where it's like you can't search them, or they're hard to search, and so it was really an aggregation project and like an update, and that's where all of the work you did, Pascal, came in. Was like not just aggregating it and making it searchable, but then like making sure these, like when new resources came online.
And I still check the we have like the spreadsheet that we have where you can, I think, validate data, like make edits or suggestions to us to make sure it's the right info. Then we also have the suggest a resource, but a lot of that I feel like was Aaron or Sellers, right? Like the actual map.
It was me and Pascal mess around.
Yeah. Well, you did all the map work actually.
We did all of the, going through all of these different resources that already exist and pulling together, because a lot of them touched on some of the same things, but then each of them had like a couple resources that one of the other ones didn't have. And so if you were only working with like one of those directories or one of those resources, you'd miss stuff, and you'd also miss things that were kind of social media or like emerging resources. Like a lot of people kind of stepped up to fill those gaps in SNAP funding, and I don't think a lot of those existing resources were set up to handle that quickly or add those to their directories, especially if it was something like a farm that has a food, like an extra food closet that they do, like this week, and they've never done it before, but they did it this week and they want people to know. And like you were able to go through and update all of that. I just did some simple map coding. Yeah,
but that was so helpful because like I still look at the map sometimes, and it's to like make sure when things need to be updated or people like suggest stuff, and I feel like it's just a lot better set up to like actually look through resources and make sure that you actually know what's around you. And also that reminded me, Aaron, one of the things I did also want to talk about, kind of related to the food resource map, but I used to work at Great Harvest Bakery and for a hot minute, and it was the Food for Friends program, which they are still doing, just so you guys know. I remember on my last day at the bakery, but also a few times, was people would come in asking about like the Food for Friends program. A lot of people donated when I was at the register, but also just was like hearing how people heard about the program was like someone heard about it from was it KXLY or
A couple TV news outlets.
yeah, like some
Crown
people
and
heard about it from
KHQ, I think.
yeah, and like a few people heard it from like their friends or family, or like I think maybe us too. I think there's like one person who specified range, but it was like it was really rewarding to see people come in and like ask to do the Food for Friends program. And it honestly just was really nice because someone made me cry actually because she was saying like just like, you know, expressing a lot of gratitude, and she was crying, so it made me cry a little bit, and I was like, yeah, no, we got you. But yeah, it was really nice. And the reason I mentioned it though was because I know at the bakery we had been trying to do something like that for a while. We had talked about it for a while, but like when we started doing the food resource map at Range, it was kind of helpful to have that support too.
Totally.
But yeah, that was kind of what I wanted to talk about. But it was so go.
Totally.
The making the resource map.
So we're going to provide a link to the resource map, and that resource map is still live.
Yes.
So if like the shutdown's over, but it's
Well, it
always
might
been
come back in like what, January, February.
right. No, totally. And I don't like that was losing like SNAP is not the only like thing that was keeping people above the poverty line or whatever. So it's like we know that cost constraints are a huge problem for our community, and we want to keep that updated, you know, not just when the federal government's messing with our community, but all the time. And so if you have resources, as you're searching through the thing, whether you need them or not, reach out to us, because there's a link in the resource to sort of update the resource or you know, change it, add new things. We're going to keep monitoring that. And I think the other thing we should say is that we're a worker-owned cooperative. For those of you who don't know, Great Harvest is a sibling cooperative of ours. So Pascal, we're all like part of the same team of Spokane Workers Cooperative. So yeah, that was it was really meaningful for me, who I spent about half my time kind of at the co-op level, to see two different teams working in a different way, but complementary ways to sort of address this need in our community. It like low-key brought me to tears a number of times talking about it and seeing how like this team always goes into like overdrive when something hits. It's usually like this intense reporting thing. It's like what happened after June 11th, or like when Justice got arrested a couple days during Pride. Like Sellers and I, there's photos of Sellers and I in the Pride parade reporting from our phones as we're hiking,
Trying to track down what happened to them, where they ended up.
So seeing like the way that mostly Sellers and Pascal, but the whole team sort of like rallied around building this resource, which is just reporting of a different sort. And then the way our other co-op colleagues were like, oh God, we want to help too. Here, how can we do this? Yeah, man, really, I don't know. I'm very much in my emotional phase. And Sellers makes fun of me all the time, but it even makes me a little emotional thinking about it right now.
Yeah. Okay, Sellers,
How much time do I have?
9 minutes.
Okay. I was hoping to eat all of Luke and Pascal's extra time. The other thing that I was really busy with in October was a story about evictions in Spokane that I ended up being really proud of. I got an email from a local attorney who does pro bono representation for people who are facing evictions. And this is like a state program that pays for it. It's a pretty innovative thing that Washington does, where basically, you know, if you're poor and you get accused of a crime, you get assigned a public defender and they represent you. This is like if you're poor and your landlord's trying to evict you, if you meet these certain requirements, the state will assign you an attorney to represent you. So kind of like a public defender for a civil eviction case. And she emailed me and told me that I needed to pay attention to this case because it was pretty emblematic of renter-landlord relations in Spokane. And so I went to my very first court case. And I sat through it all the way through from jury selection to the final verdict. I was there at 8 a.m. every day. It was pretty rough for me, not a morning person. And watched the case of a woman who was being evicted by a man named Arlen Jordan, who owns a few properties in Spokane and who operates them as a landlord from prison. He is in prison because he was convicted of sexually assaulting a woman who was interested in renting one of his apartments. He invited her back to his house, gave her alcohol that may or may not have been spiked, and then sexually assaulted her. He says it wasn't. I think the court decided it was.
Wasn't spiked.
Wasn't spiked.
It was definitely sexual assault.
Yes, it was definitely sexual assault.
Yeah.
And that all happened like in the early 2000s. Like I think the case started in 2008. There was credible allegations from dozens of women who said they had experienced something similar. There was allegations from people who were his tenants at the time who talked about him being like inappropriate with them when they went to drop off deposits, like coming out in a bathrobe.
Like somebody
or making
very close to me
advances.
when I was meeting them for the first time, someone who became very close to me in 2008, right when he got arrested, was like, I almost rented from this guy. He invited me to look at the apartment. He showed me to his apartment and offered me drinks, and then it creeped me out and I left. So this, I think in the early aughts, he had a lot of apartments it was like Brown's Addition,
Brown's
Lower
Addition,
South
the
Hill,
Lower
Mid-Level.
South Hill.
Yeah.
Later, he acquired some buildings kind of on, like, near Division.
Yeah.
More in, like, the Logan-ish neighborhood. And so, since he was convicted, this man has been operating his rental properties from prison. And for the last decade, there's been complaints from tenants about, poor living conditions, about his property managers like taking their rent and then not reporting that rent as paid. So they would pay rent and then get evicted for non-payment of rent because property managers were allegedly running off with their rent. Just all of these sordid details. And he's come up in the media before. People have written about him. There was a story in the Spokesman, I don't know, like 10 years ago in like 2016 about one of his properties getting condemned. There was another story in 2021 about the property management company that he later hired doing COVID fraud and taking people's deposit or like payments from the federal government when they would pay your rent on your behalf. So there's all these sordid details.
What's not part of the docket?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I decided to sift through all of his eviction cases. So this man has been filing hundreds of evictions from prison for the last 20 years, or 20-ish years, and I went through them all, turned it into a giant Excel spreadsheet, and then did data analysis. Like, how many of these people had lawyers? Did having a lawyer in their case impact whether or not they got evicted?
Because there's kind of a meta to this story as well. It was like Arlen Jordan is still somehow allowed to be a landlord even though he's in prison. That's was kind of blew my mind because I knew this about this dude. But then, to your point, it's like we have these renter protections now that didn't used to exist, including right to counsel. So the data part of the story, and maybe we're probably going to need to like more data to come in the future years because this is all relatively new. Are these laws actually working to protect tenants? So it was almost like this one landlord is like an object lesson in the before and after of like how easy it was to evict people 5 years ago versus how theoretically how much harder it should be now.
Yeah, and I thought it was a pretty human story despite all the numbers. Like the woman he was trying to evict, he tried to evict her 5 times before. He claimed that she owed like $40,000 in unpaid rent. She was a really interesting character. She had multiple other eviction cases before. From the stand, she told us about how she incubated and hatched chickens in her apartment.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to tell the very human stories, even when they're kind of messy. Like, even when there's not a quote-unquote perfect victim. Like,
Yeah.
she did sort of just choose to stop paying rent for a couple of years. And also, she was living in some really inhumane conditions, and it's really hard to hold somebody accountable for those conditions when
Yeah.
you don't have, money to proactively get a lawyer, and the person who owns those buildings is, operating like he's an incarcerated person. He's dealing with some of the same restrictions to running his own businesses that the journalists are dealing with when they're trying to give us info.
Yeah.
And so it's like, how is this guy taking care of his tenants? Is he operating in their best interests? Or is he continuing to manipulate people and take advantage of people from his status behind bars? I thought that story was pretty interesting, had a lot of nuance. I got to hit the really human elements and then also just do some really lengthy data analysis. And I'm sure I've been talking about this too much, so I'll just touch very briefly on something that you've heard me talk on the radio about a lot in the last couple of weeks, which is my Flock package, which also came out of very lengthy data analysis. I got a massive CSV file as a result of a public records request I filed back in June, and had to get a whole new software to analyze it because the file was too big to open in Microsoft Excel, Google Sheets, or Numbers. And just doing some of that data analysis to get at the ways that these Flock cameras are being used to surveil people in our communities. So I think the highlights for me this year have been really like
Data heavy.
figuring out ways to use data to enhance or get at human stories. And I think, daily news has a bit of a limitation in that, like, they're asked to turn things around so quickly. Nobody really probably has the time to, like, go through a spreadsheet this big. And so I'm really trying to take advantage of our open publishing calendar and no word counts to be able to get some context and get at some of these really data heavy stories.
And Spokane as a news ecosystem is more robust than a lot of other places in America, and yet we literally have professional data journalists who live in Spokane. We have two of them, neither of them that work for Spokane papers. So the data journalism that gets done is done by sort of normal reporters who don't have a background
data hobbyists.
Data hobbyists, yeah. But it's such important work because I think you're right. It's like it contextualizes human story. It sort of gives that bigger view of if this one imperfect person that you were talking about who was actually who was going through the court proceedings to try to avoid an eviction is like one human story, and then the mountain of data can at least hint that there's probably hundreds more stories just like this person.
Right. People might look at her and not find her sympathetic at all. They might think this lady didn't pay rent. She had chickens in her apartment.
Yeah.
Who cares if she gets evicted?
Totally.
I hope they didn't. I hope that people were willing to look at the nuance of that more. But you might be able to write off this one woman. But it's pretty hard to write off decades of cases going back showing that when people have lawyers against this guy, they win their cases more often than not. It's like illegal evictions or
it was like a really
pretty stark
visual in the data where you showed like a data visualization of the number of people who he brought eviction proceedings against and lost before this law came in, and the number of people he was even able to bring eviction proceedings against after this law was passed, because he was kind of just bringing eviction proceedings willy-nilly.
And most people, I want to say it was before this law passed, only 3 people secured legal representation, because the thing with people who are I think I can call him this because the spokesman did. People who are slumlords. They specifically rent to low-income people.
Right.
And that's kind of an inherently predatory relationship, because it's these people are poor and so they won't be able to hold me accountable, and this might be the best that they're willing to accept. And so people were living in, these articles going back describe conditions of pest infested and water damage, black mold, unable to breathe, but they couldn't afford to go get a lawyer to proactively pursue this or even to defend them in eviction proceedings. So it's cheaper and easier to just take the hit and move out.
And when you have what it takes to get a housing like that foreclosed upon or basically like rendered uninhabitable by the city, which is I think what happened to one of that spokesman story from the earlier in the decade, like that means that there are functioning sort of lower income housing units that have black mold. Like one of them is actually run by the county. It's a halfway house that was just in the news a little while. Like it's not just bad. It's really, really bad when it falls to that point. The other thing that I wanted to just touch on, I'm glad we're still talking about the Arlen Jordan story, is that there are not going to be perfect victims in any story. And the fact that this person raised chickens, she was like probably working, you know, at least pushing the boundaries of what would be legally allowable under that thing. But also, when you're that poor, like you're saying, you're not going to have money to hire a lawyer to proactively fight for your rights. Sometimes the only thing you can do is withhold your rent to bring some sort of pain. And that's why I think it's important, regardless of how you feel about landlords, we all need to like recognize
The
that
power
there's a
dynamic.
massive power difference in every landlord-tenant relationship.
Yeah, because one person decides whether or not you have a roof over your head at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is it for today's show, right?
Yeah, catch us next week when we talk about 2025 year in review and our 2026 News Year resolutions. Range out.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good week.
That was our show this week. Free Range is a weekly news and public affairs program presented by Range Media and produced by Range Media and KYRS Community Radio, KYRS Medical Lake Spokane. Thanks for listening.